Today I'll be talking about equatives and copular constructions in Odia in the frame of modern syntax. And so to start with, let's see what a copula entails. So a copula is basically a verb that links the subject of a sentence to a subject complement. Now it can be with a predicative expression or a referential expression. And in the uses of copulas, we do see a lot of cross-linguistic variants in across languages. Like we'll see that English has one copula with 8 forms. There are zero copula forms as well. Then there are languages like Irish Gaelic, which have two copulas with a temporary versus permanent distinction in their sense of uses. There's Odia with 4 copulas, which we will be discussing today. And then there is also a semantic variance in their uses. Sometimes the copulas can hold semantic value as shown in the Sarasta distinction in Spanish by Ashwini Deo in a 2017 paper. So now with this introduction, let's move to Odia in particular. So we see that the prototype for a non-complex verbal construction in Odia would be the main verb, then the aspect, then the auxiliary, then the tense, and then the agreement. So there are basically two tense forms for Odia. It's il for past and il for future tense, the two morphemes. And present tense is not overtly marked. Aspect is marked with U for progressive and E for perfective. And the 4 copulas that interact with all these things to form the verb is at, ach, tha, and he. So of all these copulas, the most important one that we will be considering today will be the he copula, which can be used in a number of scenarios. As can be seen here, he can be used in the sense of epistemic be with individual level predicates, become in the sense of be of behavior, in the sense of predicative be, and in as an event functor also, as in the sense of happen. So there are a lot of instances where it can be used, and a very detailed analysis on the copula system has been mentioned in B.V. Mahapatra's dissertation of in 2002. So going ahead with this, we'll take a look at how scrambling operates in Odia and generally in other languages. So what are the constraints can be rearranged to provide interpretations which makes a language more economical. Instead of having to use new vocabulary for everything, we can instead employ scrambling. And we can see this a lot in Indo-Aryan languages, as can be seen in these examples. However, it's not without the restrictions. Like if we see the first example, Seta Heroji Tara Bohi, it's a proper construction, it means that is his book. But if I change the word order to Seta Tara Bohi Hochi, which becomes SOV, it becomes an ungrammatical sentence. We'll discuss why this is later. So I'll move ahead and check on the tools that we are going to use for this analysis. So first is the concept of LCA and precedence. So the final version of Keynes' formulation, it states that a lexical item alpha precedes a lexical item beta if and only if alpha asymmetrically C commands beta, or AXP dominating alpha asymmetrically C commands beta. Now what this will do for our analysis, and what it does generally, is that it restricts the hysteresis relation, which causes a problem for precedence relation between complex subjects and the predicates, and it ignores the phonologically empty categories like traces. So both of these things will help us in our analysis as we go ahead. Then there's Bayesian's mapping hypothesis, which states, as you can see in the diagram, it states that material from VP is mapped into the nuclear scope, and material from IP will be mapped into a restrictive clause. Now the content that will be there in the restrictive clause will warrant a presuppositional reading, while the content in the domain of VP will get an existential reading. So with the same constituents, we can have two different kinds of readings according to their position in the tree. This mapping hypothesis received a small revision by Yu after he considered cross-linguistic data from Japanese and Korean and Hungarian. What he came to was a point where the split that you mentioned should have been between CP and IP instead of IP and VP. So from here on, we will be using this split in our core structures that we'll be going ahead with. So those were basically the tools that we're going to use. Now let's come to the main content, which is scrambling in Odia. So it helps mark alternate tropicalization of the predicate in Odia and helps convey the intention of the speaker. As can be seen in the examples, the focus in the first example is into of being in the play. Like in the play, he played the villain. Say Jatra the villain Heithila. But if I change the word order to say Heithila Jatra the villain, it with the intonation also it can the focus can be emphasized on his having acted in the play. So he had acted as the villain in the play. So moving ahead, this chart, this table is basically, it represents all the possible word orders in Odia with a simple construction, and the sentence in Odia column that you see and the response column that you see are basically the same. It's just the translation. So this method helps us locate the smallest change in meaning or interpretation that could be there. So if I ask a question and the response is this, then that way we can notice the difference. Like if I ask what are you doing now, if someone asks me what are you doing now, I'll say I'm playing football. But if someone asks me who is playing football, then I'll have to say I am the one playing football. So who football खेलुछि and who खेलुछि football, with a small change from SOV to SVO, this change in meaning comes about. And all the other forms similarly, as you can see, there is a corresponding question to the statement that is there in Odia and the response that is there here. So moving ahead, going to precedent and fronting. So in order to topicalize or focalize a constituent, we see a certain fronting phenomenon where the subject or object moves to the adjoining TP spec. Now TP spec is important because the first TP spec needs to have the subject for it to have the nominative case checked. Then depending on the copies that get deleted at spell out, we can have the SOV, SVO, OSV and OVS word orders. So if this is the code structure, then if this goes to spell out, then depending on the copy of the subject or the object that gets omitted, we can have these 4 word orders. There was a bit of a problem for the word first word orders, but I think some research into VP fronting might resolve this issue. So with keeping that question on hold for now, we'll go ahead and so let's take another example where we see scrambling in a complex verb formation. So the first example focuses on the doing part more. So since this kamata kori se dekhivo, so the kori verb is more to the left, so it's more fronted than dekhivo verb, which is the C verb. In the second example, we see kamata dekhivo se kari. So in the first example, it focuses on the doing part, showing more conviction. The second example means more like he will try and see what happens. So it's a very small change in interpretation, but yeah, it's there. So there are 2 verbal heads, and the construction can be shown as in this diagram below. And one of these verbs goes to receive the tense. As you can see in this construction, only one of the verbs is tensed. So one of the verb moves ahead and one stays down. So that's how we arrive at this order. So now let's go ahead and look at the type of sentences that occur with copulars. All the sentences that occur are specificational, predicational, identificational or equatives. So of these, the predicational and specificational copular clauses are derived from the same core structures as shown in the diagram on the left. So this is the core structure that Nicholson proposed in his 2005 paper on copular clauses. And taking inspiration from this, so basically the structure had a pred head and a DP and a element which is moved here, the another one predicative and one referential DP. So depending on
we are running out of time. Can you conclude in 3 minutes?
Okay, sure. So, depending on the predicational and referential movement, we will get the specificational or predicational constructions. This is how we can sum it up as specificational clauses are those where the predicational DP precedes the referential DP, and predicational clauses are those where the referential DP precedes the predicational DP. Then this is a small distinction that Isabel Roy changed the individual and stage level distinction to a tertiary distinction. However, I'll just sum it up as so there are three types, which is defining, characterizing, and situation descriptive. Here with this, we'll check how SVO and equatives work, the SVO word order. So this is the main part. So say Heuchi Dusta would be he is naughty. However, say Dusta Heuchi, which is a SOV order, would become he is being naughty. Now to explain this, let's look at this. So keeping Giesing's hypothesis in mind, what I suggest is that so if he starts out from here, then it can go here to get the tense and verb checked, and after that it will move to a fork position. So it has a so when it is in the CP domain now, it will get a presuppositional reading, and which is why we get this difference when say Busto Hyochi is there, because the verb is now in the CP domain, we can get a presuppositional when we get say Hyochi Dusto, so we will get a presuppositional reading there as in it's a characteristic of he is naughty, as it's in his nature to be naughty. So instead of an existential reading where it would be he is being naughty if the verb was left here below. So yeah, now moving ahead to equatives, it occurs only with the copular forms Heuchi and Hela, which also occurs solely in the SVO order. So there is an obligatory raising. So as you can see, this construction would be wrong. Say Raghu Heuchi would be wrong. So here, as you can see, so what happens is in equatives and identificational sentences, we will only have a V here instead of a VP here instead of the pred P, because these are not non-predicational sentences. So we will have DP1 and DP2, and the DP1 moves up to the top P position, spec top P position, and this moves to the verb, the copula will obligatorily move here, because when it gets checked for tense here, it also gets assigned a presuppositionality feature, which it will which is interpretable. It will need to, and the fork position will have an uninterpretable presuppositional feature, which will need to get satisfied. So the verb moves up here to have that feature checked before spell out, and thus we obligatorily get the construction say Heuchi Rogo instead of say Rogo Heuchi.
Please conclude now.
Yeah, this is the last slide. Can I just finish this?
Yeah.
Yeah, so with spatiotemporal modifiers, if we use so a small change, I can say Raghu Heuchi with Jatra Re, like play, in the play he will be Raghu. This is fine because it limits the time. So if we extend the time to life, it becomes wrong again. If we say Jibana se Raghu Heuchi, it would sound odd. So this is a pragmatic thing that I'm suggesting. So the remaining questions are these which I mentioned while I was presenting. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
One possible question would be, if you're talking about equatives and copula, why spend so long on talking about scrambling and word order? Because we would be interested to know these four elements that you were going to talk about: at and ach, tha, and he. And what are the co-occurrence restrictions? What are the semantic properties of this? Because that's something which is very important in all Indo-Aryan languages, as far as I know. And that would have been interesting, because the scrambling facts are a little shaky, the way you have mentioned. For example, I don't know, I'm not a Odia speaker, but Kamota Dekhibe she kori, you did not mention the agreement on Kori, so I'm not sure whether this will be acceptable as a sentence. And if there's a slight change in meaning, as you said, I'm not sure what a slight change of meaning in. So basically the question is, why spend so much time on scrambling?
Because with the equatives, I mean, since scrambling kind of seemed to be the root of it all to me, so why equatives can only occur in SVO order. I wanted to get to that. So before getting to that, I wanted to provide an introduction, basically, that all the other word orders are possible. There are SVO and SOV word orders possible for the same sentence. So that's the route that I wanted to take. But
Yeah,
yeah, I understand.
it's a common thing in mostly Indo-Aryan languages, these scrambling possibilities, and doesn't really say much about equatives and copula. Thank you, Sujit Sharma. I think it's a good work, and look for a conference where you get more time, because this has always been the problem with students who are working on, researchers working on syntax, that they run out of time, because two things they have to do. They have to introduce the data and the theory also, because the theory background is not so clear among audience in here. So that's really a challenge, and that is what you should try to learn, how to introduce the theory in simple terms to an audience who are not familiar with the theory, because people will understand.